42 million Americans are caught in uncertainty. The nation's top court has allowed President Donald Trump's administration to withhold $4 billion in food assistance, a move that's sparking debate across the country. Is this a necessary fiscal step, or a devastating blow to millions of families already struggling to eat? Welcome to Shadow Report, where we break down the stories shaping your world. Don't forget to subscribe, hit the bell icon, and stay informed with clear, unbiased analysis of today's biggest events. Chapter 1. The Supreme Court's Decision. In a highly consequential ruling, the U.S. Supreme Court has given the Trump administration permission to temporarily withhold $4 billion in federal food aid. The decision affects the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP, commonly known as food stamps, which provides financial help to low-income families to buy groceries. Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson issued an administrative stay on Friday, effectively pausing a lower court's order that had required the government to release the full amount of SNAP funding for November. The stay gives a federal appeals court in Boston more time to review the case. This means that for now, millions of Americans will not receive their full food benefits, as the Trump administration continues to argue that only partial funding is necessary. Chapter 2. Understanding SNAP and its importance. The SNAP program is one of the most vital safety nets in the United States. It supports households whose incomes are below 130% of the federal poverty line. For fiscal year 2026, the maximum monthly benefit is $298 for an individual and $546 for a two-person household. SNAP is not just a welfare program, it's a lifeline. It helps working families, children, veterans, and the elderly afford basic nutrition. On average, the program costs around $8.5 to $9 billion each month, but its reach extends to over 42 million people across the country. The sudden withholding of nearly half its funding has created immediate consequences, especially during a record-breaking government shutdown, the longest in U.S. history. Chapter 3. The shutdown context. The backdrop to this crisis is a massive government shutdown that has stretched for weeks, freezing key public services and salaries. Many agencies are operating at limited capacity or have stopped completely. The Trump administration argues that due to the shutdown, it lacks the funds to fully operate SNAP. The White House planned to allocate $4.65 billion in emergency funding, roughly half of what's required for full payments, claiming that this would allow benefits to continue in some form while negotiations over broader spending continue. Critics, however, see this as a political maneuver that unfairly targets low-income Americans to gain leverage in budget discussions. Chapter 4. The lower court ruling and controversy. Before the Supreme Court's intervention, District Judge John McConnell, appointed by former President Barack Obama, had ruled that the Trump administration's move to withhold SNAP funds was illegal. McConnell accused the administration of using food assistance as a political weapon and ordered the U.S. Department of Agriculture, USDA, to redirect money from a separate child nutrition fund worth $23 billion, financed through tariffs, to cover the shortfall. The USDA immediately appealed this decision, arguing that the order amounted to judicial overreach. Government lawyers warned that if McConnell's ruling stood, it would sow further shutdown chaos by forcing agencies to reallocate funds without congressional approval. Attorney General Pam Bondi supported the appeal, calling McConnell's decision judicial activism at its worst. Chapter 5. The Supreme Court's temporary intervention. When the case reached the Supreme Court, Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson issued a temporary stay, halting the lower court's order. The stay will remain in place until 2 days after the First U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals makes a final ruling on the matter. This effectively gives the Trump administration a short-term victory and time to argue its case that partial SNAP payments are necessary to keep the government functioning during the shutdown. However, for millions of SNAP recipients, the delay has created real-world consequences. Many have seen their food assistance lapse since the start of November. the first time in the program's 60-year history that payments were interrupted. Chapter 6. The Human Impact. The effects of the funding freeze are already being felt nationwide. With November payments delayed or cut, families have begun turning to food banks and community pantries for help. Many report having to skip meals, ration groceries, or even choose between buying food and medicine. For low-income households, even a short-term delay in benefits can lead to cascading problems. From eviction notices to health deterioration. Nonprofit organizations are also under immense strain. Food pantries in cities like Chicago, Atlanta, and Los Angeles have reported surges in demand, with supplies depleting faster than they can be replenished. Economists warn that this disruption could also hurt local grocery stores that rely on SNAP purchases, potentially causing ripple effects across communities. Chapter 7. The Legal Path Ahead. The case now returns to the First U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals in Boston, which will decide whether to uphold or block Judge McConnell's ruling. After that, the issue could return to the Supreme Court for a longer-term decision. Legal experts say the case raises serious constitutional questions about executive authority and the separation of powers. Can a president unilaterally redirect or withhold congressionally approved funds? Historically, the Impoundment Control Act of 1974 restricts presidents from delaying or stopping spending without congressional consent. But the Trump administration's lawyers argue that temporary pauses are allowed in times of fiscal emergency. This debate could set a major precedent for how future presidents manage federal programs during shutdowns. Chapter 8. Political and public reactions. Reactions to the Supreme Court's intervention have been sharply divided. Supporters of President Trump, including many Republican lawmakers, argue that the administration is acting responsibly by prioritizing fiscal stability during the shutdown. They claim that using restricted funds to cover SNAP would be unlawful and could worsen the financial crisis. Critics, however, accuse the administration of targeting the poor and vulnerable while continuing to fund other government expenses. Democrats and social advocates have condemned the move as cruel and unnecessary, arguing that it undermines the very purpose of government: to serve the people in times of need. On social media, the hashtag #SnapRelief now has been trending, with thousands urging Congress and the courts to restore full benefits immediately. As the legal battle continues, 42 million Americans wait anxiously to find out whether they'll receive the food assistance they depend on. The Supreme Court's temporary order has bought the Trump administration some time. But for millions of struggling families, time is running out. What do you think? Is this a necessary step to maintain budget discipline, or a devastating act of neglect toward America's most vulnerable citizens? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. And if you want to stay updated on stories that matter, from policy shifts to global events, make sure to subscribe to Shadow Report, hit the like button, and turn on notifications so you never miss a deep dive. Because understanding the truth behind the headlines starts here on Shadow Report.